Evening's event. Welcome to Plastics and Packaging. And I'm just so glad that we don't have any storms right now taking out the power. Last week was really sketchy, and I'm just glad to be here with everyone tonight. I wanted to start off by thanking our sponsors that we have, the Santa Cruz Climate Action Network, who has really put a lot of work into helping to organize tonight's webinar. I'd like to thank Pauline and Susan and James for all your efforts. And I'd also like to thank Slow Food Santa Cruz and the Live Oak Grange and Edible Monterey Bay Magazine for all their continued partnership with Open Farm Tours and in advocating for a sustainable regional food system. I'd also like to thank our technical crew tonight, Pauline Sales, who is with the Climate Action Network and has provided their Zoom platform, and who will be monitoring our question and answer session later on. And also Ethan Malberg, who is our behind the scenes tech guru. And Ethan is a student of the Everett Program for Technology and Social Change at UC Santa Cruz. And we're incredibly fortunate to have his expertise. And thank you both, Pauline and Ethan, for being key partners in tonight's event. I'd like to start off with just some housekeeping for this evening. If you could maybe hold your questions until after you've heard the presenters speak, because a lot of your questions, they may be actually answering in their presentations, and that'll just kind of keep it down. So we have, by the way, we have over 700 people registered for tonight's event. So I'm anticipating a lot of questions. So that would help kind of hold it. And also, if you can type your, we'll be doing the question and answer segment at the end of the presentations. And we've allotted a fair amount of time for that. We've got like 15-20 minutes for that, so should be enough. But if not, we'll have a link to, we'll have a slide with some links on it that you're welcome to contact the presenters directly to if you had questions for them. So I guess with that, we'll get started. And also I wanted to mention that this is a follow-up actually to our plastic culture in plastics in agriculture webinar that we had in October. And if you want to view that, that's available. The recording is available on Open Farm Tours. That was a really wonderful webinar as well. So tonight's webinar is on plastics in packaging, and we have 8 industry professionals who are going to be presenting tonight. I'm so happy to have these people here. They're just fantastic wealth of information. And I just want to, before we get started, just kind of say that, our planet is in crisis right now. And we're experiencing mass collapse of ecosystems like we've never seen before. And the current extinction rates are up to hundreds of times higher than that any other point in the past 10 million years. And a third of the marine mammals are on the brink of extinction with overfishing and pollution. Humans have significantly altered 3/4 of the Earth's land area, leaving more than 500,000 species without enough habitats to survive, which is why, we're in the situation we are now with the pandemic of viruses jumping, to other forms of life to survive. They're just trying to survive like everything else. We've destroyed a third of the planet's forest cover, which are the lungs of our planet, in the last 2 centuries alone. And plastic pollution and greenhouse gas emissions plays a huge part in all that. And so we're going to be talking to our professionals tonight and kind of finding out, what's the current state is of our region here, Santa Cruz, Monterey, and San Benito County, and kind of do a deep dive into that so we can all understand better what's going on and how we can approach to get it under control. So I'd like to start off tonight with our first presenter, and that would be Mary Scheller. Mary is a former advertising professional and volunteers as a master recycler for the city of Santa Cruz. Mary's also a docent at the Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary Exploration Center in Santa Cruz, and she's led hundreds of hours of beach cleanups as a sanctuary steward with Save Our Shores, which gives her a firsthand view at the plastic pollution. Mary was, in 2019, she was a recipient of the Ocean Steward of the Year Award. And Mary was also a presenter at our Plastics and Agriculture webinar last October. And you can also hear her presentation on the recording Open Farm Tours. Welcome, Mary.
Thank you, Penny. Let me share my screen with you all. Good evening to everyone who's joining us from all around the world, I hope. And let's see if we can all see my screen. Great. And I'm going to stop myself here. Okay. Do you see my screen? Is it looking good? Okay, terrific. All right. Well, thank you again and good evening. I grew up in a time when convenience was king and single use wasn't even a term. I didn't really think about throwaway because it was going away to the recycling center to be turned into something useful, or so I thought. I was an advertising professional for over 30 years who helped big brands launch new products without giving much thought to responsible design and their end of life. It really wasn't until I entered the City of Santa Cruz Master Recycler program a couple years ago that I dove into the hard facts about plastic packaging. Tonight, I'd like to share some of my insights in the hope of educating and inspiring action in each of you. The facts look grim, but I think it's really important to position it up front for you. Half of the plastic on Earth was produced in the last 13 years, and that's projected to quadruple by 2050 unless we do something. You see, virgin plastic is cheap. It's much cheaper than recycled plastic. In fact, only 9% of the plastic in the world today is recycled. Back in the 1970s, big plastics and big oil knew it was not economically feasible to recycle plastic. Yet they and the Plastics Council heavily promoted it because the more they produced, the more they profited. Well, let's fast forward 50 years, and today the majority of plastic doesn't end up in our landfill, and it isn't certainly recycled. It litters our watersheds and oceans. Today, the US leads the world in plastic waste, and we've moved up pretty rapidly from being number 20 just a few years ago. All the household waste from COVID-19 has only added to the burden of plastic pandemic. So the biggest source of plastic waste is product packaging, and almost half of that comes from food containers. Just walk into any supermarket and you'll see plastic in every aisle. 60% of that food packaging comes from just one family, the thermoforms, or what we all call them, clamshells. No worries, I used to think, when I'd buy blueberries and clamshells. I love blueberries. So I'd buy them and I'd toss my empty clamshells in the blue bin and think they'd get recycled. Well, what I learned is while they were accepted at Green Waste, which is my recycling facility, they only got recycled if markets existed. Because clamshells are made of glycol, a low-grade plastic that mucks up machinery, it's tough to find a market for them. So in many municipalities, hundreds of thousands of clamshells sit in storage in semi-trailers and warehouses waiting for a market. Too often, it's just too expensive, so they get landfilled or burned. This 2020 chart from Greenpeace shows how few single-use plastic, This 2020 chart from Greenpeace, which I will put up, here we go, shows how few single-use plastic items are being accepted, much less recycled in the US. Out of 367 MRFs, and bear with me tonight because there's a lot of acronyms in waste management. MRFs is material recovery facilities, or as we call them, recycling facilities. So out of the 367 they surveyed in the US, only 14% accepted plastic clamshells, 11% cups, 7% food trays, 1% plastic plates and cutlery, and none of them took coffee pods, food pouches, and wrappers. While the Greenpeace report shows that there's still a strong market for bottles and jugs, which are a harder plastic called, and here's an acronym, PET, labeled number 1 or 2, the remaining mixed plastics have few, if any, markets. The reality is that many types of plastic are being burned or buried since China cracked down on importing US waste in 2018. Many products that manufacturers label recyclable have virtually no market as new products. Adding to this confusion are recycling symbols, those chasing arrows with numbers in them. These 7 arrows below don't represent recyclability. They represent different types of plastic. Back in 1989, Big Oil, once again, lobbied almost 40 states to mandate that this symbol appear on all plastic, even if there was no way to recycle it. Companies began to use it as a green marketing tool, so consumers felt good about their purchases. And brands continued to design packaging without regard for what happened to it downstream at Waste Management. Realizing that this was misleading and manipulating consumers, some of the MRFs fought the industry to have the symbol removed or changed, starting here in California. They fought for years, but they lost. And the financial burden for recycling was placed on Waste Management and on all of us as consumers. So where is single-use plastic today? Let's take a quick look at some packages and sustainable alternatives. Ask yourself, where will this package end up when you shop? You'll find as time goes on, it becomes easier and easier to change your behavior and to refuse single use. So the first ones are thermoforms or plastic clamshells, and they're ubiquitous. You've seen them everywhere from baked goods to produce. If you live in the city of Santa Cruz, they go in the trash. If you live in the county of Santa Cruz and have green waste, they're accepted in the blue bin, but only recycled if markets exist. Instead, look for sustainable cardboard options that are 100% recyclable, like the ones on the right. Now here's a double whammy for me. Black plastic covered in plastic film, both of which are nearly impossible to recycle. These ears of corn are packaged to showcase the product, but why? Why do that when you can choose the vegetables in the amount you want from the better looking loose produce on the right? This plastic tub on the left turns my stomach, and I love biscottis. The tub may get recycled if it isn't made of glycol, which is in clamshells, but all those individually wrapped plastic packages inside, they're not going to get recycled. They'll end up in the trash, or worse, littering our oceans. A better alternative is the recyclable cardboard box on the right. I find these pouches at many of my beach cleanups, not only in the sand, but in the blue bin where they contaminate valuable recyclables. Plastic pouches and straws are not recyclable. If you want single serve, choose bottles and cans, which can be recycled again and again. And please ditch the straw or bring a reusable one. Styrofoam and plastic egg cartons drive me crazy. Why reinvent something that worked for decades, like the pulp fiber cartons on the right, which are recyclable and compostable? The thin styrofoam is not recyclable and degrades for centuries. The plastic cartons may be recyclable in some places, but not Santa Cruz, so they end up in the landfill. Finally, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention mixed materials. This Trader Joe's coffee can on the left isn't recyclable unless you pull apart all the elements. It's got a plastic lid, a paper wrapper, a cardboard cylinder, and a metal bottom. If you can't reuse this container, it goes in the trash. A recyclable paper bag of coffee is a better choice. Well, now, as we look to alternatives to plastics, I think it's really important for you to be aware of what's been lurking in paper, cardboard, and compostable packaging too. The worst thing would be for us to move from plastic to material with PFAs. Another acronym I'll explain to you, and replace one chemical with another. So you may not recognize the name PFA, but you've come into contact with it almost every day and likely consumed it. PFAs are a class of nearly 5,000 man-made chemicals that have been here for over 70 years. In recent years, they've been in fast food containers like McDonald's Big Mac boxes and Chipotle's compostable bowls. PFAs repel water, stains, and grease in food packaging. They accumulate in soil, water, crops. Excuse me, my slides are running away from me. PFAs, as you can see from this chart, are highly toxic to the environment and our bodies, and they take thousands of years to degrade, hence the name Forever Chemicals. A number of municipalities have banned them, but it is critical as a consumer to make sure that your to-go-ware and compostables are PFA-free. Here's a quick test you can do at home. Take a couple of drops of cooking oil and put them in your takeout container or takeout bag. If the oil beads up and stays that way, the likelihood is the container has PFAs. So now, given these realities, how do we control the plastic packaging pandemic? What can we do to help turn the tide? Well, it really starts with one step at a time. You don't have to do everything. Just do one thing when you leave here tonight. Start by doing away with throwaway and refuse single-use products, even compostable ones. Rethink your purchases and their packaging. When I'm at the store, I ask myself, do I need this? Is it excessively packaged? Is there something more sustainable I can buy? And where is this ultimately going to end up? Before I make a shopping list, I ask myself, what am I going to do with the packages of what these packages or this leftover food? How can I reduce my waste before I buy and after I get home? Can I reuse this over and over? One example for me is getting rid of plastic disposable shavers. I bought a stainless steel razor with titanium blades years ago, just like the one my dad had when I was a kid. Not only is it reuse, it's retro cool. Ask, can I recycle this? If not in my city, perhaps at Gray Bears or Best Buy or TerraCycle or maybe at a retailer. And then ask, will this package rot into healthy soil in my home composter or in an industrial one? And ask, is there an industrial composter in my region? And if not, why isn't there? So I started off with some pretty tough facts about waste. And while we can't recycle ourselves out of the plastic packaging pandemic, there are really actionable steps that we can all take. First, educate yourself. Don't accept marketing at face value. Question green packaging. For example, Coca-Cola, the world's largest plastic polluter, is launching a plant bottle that's touted as better for the environment. It's better because it's got 30% bioplastic in it, but the rest of it, the 70%, is petroleum. Second, never underestimate the power of your purse and voice. As an advertising professional, I can tell you firsthand, consumers drive change. With companies large and small, urge them to design packages for reuse or for easy recyclability. Call them, email, petition, use social media and more to voice your opinion and your advocacy. And use your money to back the businesses that support it. Nationally and locally, support stores who choose reusable and sustainable packaging. We've got plenty of them in our region. Let the store owners, the managers, and even the produce managers know you will back their efforts. They need to hear from you to justify sustainable and often costlier choices. So groups here are working to ban single-use plastic in Santa Cruz, and I call on other regions to do likewise, whether it's a ban or it's adding a fee for single-use at retail. Finally, support legislation to make manufacturers responsible. This is my last acronym for you guys. It's called EPR, Extended Producer Responsibility. Federal legislation was put in Congress last year to phase out single-use plastics. Let's keep pushing it forward. Last week, 2 New York legislators drafted a recycling bill to get money flowing back into recycling programs in their state, create green jobs, and incentivize brands to use more recyclable materials and reduce their packaging. It's a win-win for everyone and could become a model for other cities. And just today, as I was getting this presentation ready, legislators in 9 states, including California, introduced a plan to push EPR and relieve local governments and taxpayers of the financial burden. It will create an incentive for products and packaging to be designed to be less costly for the environment. You see, industry has had every financial incentive to do the least amount possible because they were not held responsible for the problems created by their products. So the good news is change is underway. And because plastic pollution has no boundaries, our advocacy and solutions shouldn't either. It's up to us to be the drivers of change in our lives and in our communities, starting today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. That was a wonderful presentation. Let me see, get my video up here.
Thank you, Penny.
Well, thank you. And, you know, what a great presentation that was, really. And I love the part, never underestimate the power of your personal voice, because really that makes a huge difference. And as consumers, we are the drivers of change. So, and you know, as we're putting these webinars together, it became very apparent very early on that you couldn't just address one aspect of the problem, because it's a systematic, it's a systemic sort of thing that has everything works together. And so you address the manufacturing, you know, the waste, it all has to mesh together for the end of life cycle to happen. So that's very important. Our next presentations were actually a panel, and this is our waste reduction specialists representing Santa Cruz, Monterey, and San Benito County. And we have 4 panelists who will be joining us. We have Leslie O'Malley, who's the Waste Reduction Program Manager for the City of Santa Cruz. She specializes in waste reduction strategies and recycling processes. She holds professional association certifications in zero waste principles and practices. Been previously named Sustainability Champion of the Month by University of California, Santa Cruz. Building bridges in the community and meeting people wherever they are on the hierarchy of refuse, rethink, reduce, reuse, recycle, and rot are the keynotes that guide her work. Leslie leads the recycling educational program, and my one regret is that with this pandemic that we can't all go visit the Demio Lane facility, because that honestly was what really opened my eyes to all of this. When you see it in person, just the amount of waste that is generated, you never forget that. Also with us this evening is Jana Falk, and Jana is the recycling coordinator at Salinas Valley Recyclables. The team at SRV has had a bold vision of a future without landfills, and to achieve this, we must all think, act, and plan sustainably as individuals, businesses, and communities Jana and her team enjoy engaging with the public to share the vision of a cleaner future. We also have Angela Gobal, Public Education and Outreach Specialist for Monterey Regional Waste Management District. And Angela has been in the resource recovery industry for 11 years. After receiving her BA in Liberal Arts from Sarah Lawrence College, she's worked for Recology as a customer service representative in San Francisco and developed division programs for businesses in Silicon Valley as a waste zero specialist. She led communications, education, and outreach programs for San Francisco, Urban Gardens in Hayes Valley, at Hayes Valley's Farm, and Bloom Justice. And she's been with the Public Education and Outreach Specialist at Monterey Regional Waste Management District for over 5 years. And representing San Benito County is Selena Stutler, and she's the Integrated Waste Management Staff Analysis and Green Business Coordinator for San Benito County. San Benito County's integrated waste management is comprised of the city of Hollister, San Juan Bautista, and unincorporated San Benito County. Administers recycling, green businesses, and waste reduction programs to meet CalRecycle waste mandates. Welcome, panelists, and I'll let you take it from there.
Okay, so I'll get it started. So Mary shared some great insight that she's gained after taking a deeper dive through our Master Recycler Volunteer Training Program. And she was already very well versed in how plastics impact the watershed, but we also get to see how plastics are impacting our waste shed. So I joined my colleagues here tonight in sharing with you how plastic travels through our jurisdictions. So our first slide, so by now most people have seen this iconic photo and that famous term from the 1967 film, The Graduate, plastics. Who could have imagined how prescient that advice would be? Next slide. So I started to see in the chat some questions about how does policy impact this, and we're going to start with a higher level view and take it down to the mechanization and the technology of the process of recycling. But policy is an important part, and change is underway. All the way back to 1992, the FTC, or the Federal Trade Commission, introduced the Green Guides, and it's a multi-page document that marketers and manufacturers are supposed to use to help them avoid making environmental claims that are misleading. Down to the state level, in 2019, Governor Newsom signed into law the California Recycling Market Development Act. And out of that came a statewide commission on recycling markets and curbside recycling. It's consisted of representatives, public agencies, private solid waste enterprises, and environmental organizations that all have expertise in recycling. In November, this commission submitted 19 articles for review in draft form, and I encourage you, I'll find a link and I'll put that in the chat, and it's really worthwhile to looking at that. But 2 of the articles include coming up with a uniform definition of recyclable and also compostable. And then on a local level, cities and counties all over the Bay Area, as Mary mentioned, are starting to regulate this through policy. We'd like to say that people and businesses and manufacturers will all do it on their own because it's the right thing to do, but sometimes it does take a little nudge from policy. So one part of some ordinances that are picking up, in addition to plastic bans like polystyrene or bag bans, but picking up steam is the available upon request. So that's one thing I encourage everyone to do, is that in cities that have these bans, for example, in the city of Santa Cruz, businesses are supposed to be asking you if you'd like a straw, would you like those utensils, and really important now during COVID. But you can beat them to the punch and say, no, thank you, when you're ordering that to-go order on the phone. I don't want any accessories. And that should save businesses some money, because if you consider that a ketchup packet is 5 cents and 77% of people are eating at home anyways, we don't necessarily need that. Next slide. So COVID, the whole reason we're all meeting online as opposed to some great big auditorium, COVID has had a huge impact on all that great policy progress that we were making. So some of that stems around the fear, that initial fear. It's hard now to find somewhere that you can bring your own coffee cup, bring your own water bottle. So we're learning more that the virus doesn't necessarily transmit through surface touching, but out of an abundance of caution, which is fair. it's made a real shift in things. So a whole lot more takeout, ordering. As you can see these bins, who can tell me which one is the recycling bin? I can't tell either. And so that's what ends up happening is they all get overflowing, and the waste hauler may come along and look at it. And while you can see some recyclables in there, it may be just by eye level so contaminated that it doesn't even make it through the sortation process, and it may just get landfilled. So the other place that recycling, go back one second. The other place that recycling or COVID has impacted recycling is just the whole supply chain. Is manufacturers are having trouble finding enough material to make new bottles, glass, plastic, aluminum cans. And then the people that are sorting this material, it's having a huge impact on them. All right, next slide.
So in 2018, we conducted a public opinion survey led by EMC Research. We wanted to better understand the local public's perception and understanding of recycling better. So we conducted a survey for Western Monterey County. One of the questions was asking people, do you agree or disagree with this statement? I know how to sort my waste correctly into the proper garbage, recycling, and yard trimmings bins. And 96% of the public said, yeah, I got this. I know how to do it. Only 4% were either uncertain or said, no, I don't know how to do that. Next slide. But then we gave everyone a little quiz and we put their knowledge to the test. We asked them, what would you do with a paper towel? Which bin would you put it in? What would you do with a plastic bag, etc. We asked them 8 common but maybe slightly challenging items. And our findings were that only a quarter of people really had it down. They got 7 or 8 of the items correct, whereas almost 30% got 5 or less items correct. They had a bit of room for improvement. And this really fits the idea and psychology of self-concept, where we have one idea of ourself and our behavior, but then when you observe the behavior, it might not match up. And there is this disparity between local perception of how we're recycling and what's actually happening out at the curb in your bin, which we'll look at in more detail in a little bit.
So most of us have come to equate recycling with that triangle that Mary talked about, we'll continue to talk about in our presentation, and the blue bin and the convenience of that. But we have to understand that recycling can be so much more. So most of us all process our material through single stream. There used to be a day that you'd separate it, fiber on one side, containers on the other side, but now it all gets mixed together. And there's a great analogy in this industry, is that it's sort of like trying to unscramble an egg. There's a white, there's a yolk, there's a white, there's a yolk. So you get the picture. The other way that we can continue to recycle with a little more effort is through drop-off, or mail-in programs. For example, Nespresso has a program that if you happen to participate and use those pods, Nespresso at least uses aluminum pods, and you can send them back to them. They'll separate it, they'll compost the coffee, they'll recycle the aluminum. TerraCycle, as Mary mentioned earlier, is a company that you can send them all sorts of stuff. My only downside with that is that the carbon footprint of all the jet fuel to fly that material from the West Coast to the East Coast, and it often is used in waste to energy programs or incineration. But on our local level, with a little more effort, in the mid-county of Santa Cruz, Gray Bears is a nonprofit that owns the only piece of equipment, it's called a densifier, that if you drop off your packaging styrofoam to them, not your dirty plates, not your other things, but if you drop off packaging styrofoam to them, they feed it into this machine that's pictured here. It heats it and it extrudes it and it spits it out in these bricks which harden. Then it gets sent to Lodi and it gets turned into picture frames and baseboards. So that is true recycling. And some of these processes are things that take us a little bit extra effort, but they are ways that keep things out of landfill, and they are technically recycling.
All right, so as we've learned about MRFs and the different waste haulers in our area, you can see here the map of the Tri-County area. The blue dots are all of the waste haulers that pick up waste at your curbside. And the yellow stars are where the MRFs are located. So that's where the recycling is sorted. So at the city of Santa Cruz, there's a very manual labor facility where it's people powered and they sort through all the materials. And the Monterey Regional Waste Management District has people power, but also more technical sorting that Angela will go into more detail later. And then the third MRF in our region is Monterey Disposal, and that's also more of the kind of people-powered sorting. So we have two short video clips here to look at. One is from the city of Santa Cruz MRF and talking about the contamination and recycling, and then a little video clip at the district. So bear with me real quick as I switch over to the video clips, and hopefully this will work appropriately.
All right, it's go time. Let's do this. All right, everyone still with me?
I'm all right. I'm still here. Ugh, what's that smell?
Oh, yeah. Okay, so first things first, my friends. Sad news. Not everyone gets to live the dream of being recycled.
That's right. Food left on recyclables can not only ruin an entire blue bin, but much of the entire truckload as well. That's why people need to remember that things with food on them need to go in the trash.
Remember to recycle right.
It's one of the most important tools to help in the fight against climate change.
Getting to be new things is just so much fun.
Aren't those guys adorable? So that was the Santa Cruz MRF, and here's the facility at Monterey Regional. Oops. Screen shares. All right, so hopefully you enjoyed those little videos there about the different facilities. So it's a bit to get all of the materials through the process here.
So our materials recovery facility, it's a 2.0 because we did a huge improvement project in 2018. The original facility was built in the mid 90s and we only sorted construction and demolition debris pretty much all by hand. This new upgrade, we worked with bulk handling systems to put in a lot of technology, as Jana mentioned, including optical sorters, which are the coolest part. They send lasers out, that a beam of light that hits a piece of plastic, and in less than a second, with the light refraction, it can identify what kind of plastic it's made out of, put out a gust of air, and get it into the right sort line. So we did unfortunately open when national sword policy went into effect. This was when China clamped down on contaminated loads that were coming in. They said, we don't want your garbage anymore. And we designed our facility to have up to 5% contamination in the outgoing bales. But with these new standards, we had to get it down to 0.5%, which meant that we had to make up that difference through a lot of labor and more upgrades. We just put in over $3 million more of new equipment this past year. So this is why we can really use your help to put the correct items in the bin. Like the city of Santa Cruz's video showed, when we have contamination mixed in with the good recyclables, it does jeopardize the quality of the material and mean that some of it gets landfilled. Next slide. So we have 2 commodity brokers. These are brokers just like a stockbroker is looking for the highest bidder to sell your stock. We work with Waste Management and potential industries to broker this material worldwide. We put our bales into trucks and they go up to the Bay Area, and then they're either shipped off domestically or they get on cargo ships and go to Asia. We are very transparent about where the material goes and what it gets turned into. In fact, this list just updated this week where Mexico is a new destination for some of our materials. And you can see we take a few different grades of plastic. Number 1s, those are clear water bottles. Number 2s, this category called mixed rigids, which are like large plastics. And number 5s. Next slide.
As you saw from Angela's global market diagram, there are some plastics that are accepted and recycled at that particular MRF, like plastics 1, 2, and 5, and mixed rigid plastics. However, other plastics like plastic bags, plastic films, or even black plastics are not recycled, nor are they accepted. Acceptance varies MRF to MRF. The numbers 1 through 7 within a recycle triangle that you likely see on a plastic package, bottle, or container are resin identification codes. Sorry. There you go. Placed on plastics to tell waste workers what kind of plastic it is and how it should be processed. Resin identification codes are used to help recycling plants sort plastics. It is often assumed that this code means a plastic is automatically recyclable, but that's not always the case, as we saw from Mary's presentation. And as Leslie mentioned, plastics are cheap to make from virgin material, but expensive to recycle. The sorting and melting of that plastic is expensive. And often plastic can only be recycled once or twice before it becomes unusable. Next slide. I wanted to share these graphics by Waste Management Seattle, Washington. They break down the 4 factors that determine recyclability: 1, preparation; 2, separation; 3, manufacturing; and 4, markets. The first factor, preparation, is key. Items placed in recycling should be clean, empty, dry, and loose. Foods and liquids contaminate recycling by reducing the value of the commodity and can also impact the recyclability of many items, such as paper and cardboard. So give that peanut butter glass jar a quick wipe, or that plastic soda bottle a rinse and shake dry before placing into your recycling bin. Next slide. And here are some examples from local waste haulers and local governments advertising to keep recycling clean. You'll also see some tips on how to reduce recycling contamination. For example, Recology in San Benito County educates residents to place flimsy plastics like Ziploc bags, plastic film in the trash along with plastic bags. This type of plastic is difficult to recycle due to few markets, and they can get caught in MRF sorting equipment, increasing the total cost to recycling. You'll notice the city of Santa Cruz, on the other hand, does accept plastic bags as long as residents bag their bags. Next slide. I see black squares on the screen. Okay, I'll just keep going. So this leads us to, can you go back to?
I have a message that says that this is because you aren't in slide mode. I really don't know. The black squares are jumping all over the place right now. They're very distracting.
Sorry about that. I'm trying to, I didn't realize my Zoom controls were showing up for everybody, and I don't know if there's a way to hide them because I only have one screen right now.
So who are you?
Jana.
Okay. So, yeah, I don't know. I've never encountered this problem before.
Okay. Well, here. I'll try to not touch anything. I keep seeing chats and then I check.
There's 2 there right now. Mm-hmm. One on the top and one on the right.
Oh, this is that?
Still one more, or maybe 2 more.
I'm not sure how to make these go away.
They say better.
Okay, sorry about that. I had no idea. Okay.
Yeah, there's still one more. Yep, that one.
Someone's saying you need to minimize the Zoom chats and participants on your screen. I don't know if that would make a difference.
What?
I did minimize them. I don't think I.
So no boxes now.
Yeah.
No presentation either.
So they're coming from the presentation. They're not coming from the basic Zoom itself.
Well, Zoom is overlaying on top of the presentation, and so I only have one screen right now, so I'll
answer a question while you're working on that. Someone asked about shredded paper. We do take shredded paper in our recycling program in Monterey, and we receive materials from San Benito and Watsonville as well. So you just need to put those in a clear plastic bag or a paper bag. This is the one exception to putting a plastic bag in your recycling cart.
So sorry.
Well, I'll go ahead and talk a little bit about separation, which was the next factor of recyclability. Once the recycling arrives to the MRF, after being properly sorted, the facility and workers must be able to sort that material. By residents and businesses bagging their bag in Santa Cruz City, as example, workers at the MRF can better separate and avoid sorting equipment issues. Another obstacle recyclability is the size of the item. Plastics too small or thin, like lids, straws, utensils, those slip through sorting screens, often creating a mess or potential damage to equipment like plastic bags do. The third factor is manufacturing. Next slide. A manufacturer must be able to make something new from that material. Plastic is often recycled only once and turned into carpet, clothing, or packaging. Going back to that global market diagram Angela used, plastics recycled at that particular MRF are made into carpet, plastic paint cans, packaging, molded plastic products, and resin and flake for further manufacturing. Next slide. And lastly, a manufacturer must be willing to buy that material. Next slide. So that being said, some haulers and jurisdictions accept material even though there may not be a current market, or in other words, a manufacturer willing to buy the material. But the hauler or jurisdiction may accept it to be in the best position to market the material if a buyer appears. Recology in San Benito County, for example, accepts and educates residents to place aseptic beverage containers like milk cartons and vegetable broth containers, as well as plastics 1 through 7 in their blue bin. However, this recycling collected is then taken to the Monterey Regional Waste Management District MRF, where really only 1, 2, 5, and rigid plastics are actually getting recycled. Next slide.
So someone asked in the chat, they got ahead, and they were wondering about, how much of what I put in my bin is actually recycled. And we do analyze, we do a composition study every year to check that out. We've done one for the last 3 years. The teal color is 2018, the forest green color is 2019, and the pink is 2020. So as you can see, our contamination has been increasing over the last year due to the pandemic. But we want to get this down to below 10%. Even before the pandemic, we were still at 22%, and now we're at 30%. So it is significant, and this is from all our different jurisdictions delivering recycling. We receive recyclables from Western Monterey County, but also Salinas and the unincorporated county, Watsonville, San Benito County. So we are a regional facility. And I did want to also point out that we do not sort your garbage. Our facility actually has that capability, but we are not doing it. So keep that in mind. It does make a difference which bin you're putting an item in. I'm sure that the registrants for this webinar are pretty conscious about that. Next slide. And this is the breakdown. Cardboard is the #1 material in our recycling. It's bulky, it's heavy, and people are getting more packages delivered than ever. We call it the Amazon effect in our industry. But the number 2 category is refuse. So what we've seen with the pandemic is people have been doing more clean outs in their homes. Maybe they're going through their pantries and getting rid of expired food, but it's a whole can or jar filled. Maybe they're doing some organization and getting rid of some clothing, and a donation center is closed. So they're putting it in their blue bin thinking, hey, this is still good. Once it gets to the MRF, they'll figure out what to do with it. But we actually cannot reuse those items at that point in time. So it is important that you get that picked up by your hauler in a special free pickup, or drop it off for donation. Then we have paper, glass, plastic, metal, film plastic. You might be like, film plastic, 2.6%, not a big deal. But this is by weight, not volume. And film plastic's very light, so this is actually a huge nuisance. It gets caught in our machines and we have to shut them down every day for maintenance. It gets into the bales of paper and cardboard especially, and degrades that material. So like Selena said, we have been doing a huge outreach campaign to get the word out. And it is confusing. Some areas are taking bags of plastic bags still, and other ones aren't. Next slide.
We wanted to visually share some plastic packaging examples and how they differ MRF to MRF in the Monterey Bay Area region. We included the Monterey Disposal MRF, the Monterey Regional Waste Management MRF, Santa Cruz City MRF, and also the San Jose MRF, where Santa Cruz County recyclables are sorted. You can see that the Monterey Regional Waste Management MRF accepts recyclable clamshells 1 in 5. Santa Cruz County accepts plastic clamshells and recycles them only when markets exist. A few markets exist for the aseptic packages, and at this time, the only MRF accepting them are Santa Cruz County, and these include packages such as juice boxes, milk cartons, or soup broth cartons. Next slide. Looking at plastic wrapping like pallet wraps, shrink wraps, liners, Santa Cruz City MRF and Santa Cruz County accept and recycle this material, but it must be bagged separately from hard plastics and other recyclables. Flimsy plastic like chip bags, coffee bags, or candy wrappers aren't recycled at any of the MRFs shown here. This is due to the type of plastic they contain. The products are often made with layers of mixed plastic and aluminum materials, which makes them very hard to recycle. It is best to toss those in the garbage, although there are other options to recycle, such as TerraCycle, like Leslie mentioned earlier. Next slide. So for plastic bags like grocery bags, bread bags, dry cleaning bags, and many local grocery stores will offer drop-off bins by their entrance. They often, they must be free of all food and liquid residue, and Santa Cruz City and County accept those plastic bags and film only if you bag the bags, just like the plastic wrap. Plasticfilmrecycling.org or earth911.com are some online resources you can use to search for drop-off locations. As for that black plastic, it generally is hard to recycle, and Santa Cruz County is accepting these. Again, only when markets exist are they actually getting recycled. Next slide. To learn more on recycling right and what goes where, there are many resources available to the public. Haulers, local government, and MRFs alike offer recycle guides that can be found online or mailed to your home or business upon request. Next slide. If you are trying to reduce paper waste, recycling search tools are often available online, such as the What Goes Where, which is offered throughout the Monterey region. Simply enter your zip code. There is also an online recycle search guide for Santa Cruz City and the Recology What Bin search tool for San Benito County. We encourage you to check out your local hauler or local government's website for virtual tour videos of the recycling facilities, Recycle Right how-to videos, and more. Next slide. For the next slide. Oh, we're a little bit far behind. Sorry, next slide. Oh, actually, I'm sorry, back one. For the Monterey Regional Waste Management District and also the Salinas Valley Recycles and Monterey Disposal Regions, residents and businesses can download the What Goes Where app for convenient search on their phone. Next slide. And a last local online resource I wanted to share for those interested in further interest in plastic discussion is the Unwrapping Plastic series available on the Monterey Regional Waste Management District's website. These series take a deep dive into the linkage between plastic production, resource management, and plastic pollution, as well as environmental justice. Next slide.
All right. Okay. So we've covered how plastic has evolved over time, how to recycle it, and where it goes once it's recycled. But now what? So do we have an alternative? One option is bioplastics. Bioplastics are plastic materials that are not derived from fossil fuels, but from plants. There are many benefits to bioplastic, mostly that they're a better alternative in regards to greenhouse gases. However, once in the environment, bioplastics act just like traditional plastics, causing all the same harm. Additionally, they're not always fully compostable, even in commercial composting operations, and are screened out and sent to the landfill. Also, land is required to grow the material for bioplastic, which can compete with other food products. Overall, bioplastics are a better option than plastic for or traditional plastic for our environment, as a 2017 study determined that if we switch to bioplastics, we could cut greenhouse gases emissions by 25% in the US. Additionally, we can reduce that greenhouse gas emissions if all of bioplastics were created with renewable energy. So as a consumer, as we've discussed already tonight, you have the power to vote with your dollar with every purchase you make. Every time you purchase something in a package, you signal the market for more of that item. Consumers have spoken up and made big changes. For instance, Trader Joe's recently changed a lot of their package of produce to meet market demands from consumers to have loose, non-packaged produce. So when there is a choice, remember that you have the power and you are telling manufacturers what you want. So speak up, purchase package-free items. When you can't, look for PFAS-free fiber packaging, and then the next best option would be bioplastics. Avoid plastics whenever possible. Buy bulk dry goods. Buy bulk goods like yogurts and cheeses instead of individual servings. And remember, refusal of unnecessary plastic is a choice, and it's your choice. Use your consumer power and ask retailers and manufacturers to package materials in sustainable packaging. So once you have an item, what you do with it is also a choice, and your actions can make a big difference. We've all seen lots of COVID litter around. Make sure your garbage makes it into a garbage bin. If you drop items on top of an overflowing garbage bin, like the picture Leslie showed earlier, chances are your materials will end up in a gutter that may go out into the ocean, or at least pollute our neighborhood and not end up in the right location. As we learned already today, recycling contamination is a big problem. Do your part to make sure your recycling is empty, clean, and dry. Keeping your recycling clean will help reduce contamination and increase the recyclability of all the other items in the bin. Also, when in doubt, just throw it out. Putting items into the recycling that cannot be recycled just give them a very expensive trip through the MRF, and ultimately they end up in the landfill anyway. So please do your part and recycle responsibly. So to make a difference in the plastic packaging crisis we found ourselves in, remember, every small step is a step toward real enduring change. The 5 R's actually have an order. Refuse all items you don't need. Say no to the plastic bags. Say no to the utensils. Say no to the kids' party favor bags filled with unnecessary dollar store plastics. Reduce items you purchase and choose more environmentally friendly products. Reuse what you already have. And lastly, recycle products responsibly. So with that, we thank you for your attention tonight, and sorry for the technical issues, and we hope you learned something. We hope you share at least one thing you learned with one other person. Share the knowledge and help change our world. Please follow us on social media to keep you up to date.
Okay, thank you, panelists. And wow, it's a lot of information. It's a lot of materials, you know, to keep track of as consumers. I mean, it's daunting, really. It's kind of like the Wild West out there. There's really no standardization among materials or anything as far as, you know, being recycled or how they're going to keep going through the process. So I'm really excited about our next group of presenters because they're going to be addressing this from the manufacturing point of view as far as the materials. And our first presenter is Sarah Lozano, who's the Manager of Marketing and Product Development and Sambrio Packaging. Sambrio is local in Watsonville, and they're in their 98th year of agriculture industry. They've been pioneering innovative packaging solutions since 1923 and received the best packaging in 2018 from their Produce Marketing Association for their ReadyCycle sustainable packaging line. Sarah's been a driving force behind that line and shed a light on the education on a packaging choice for consumers, retailers, growers, what's better for our planet and communities. Sarah's also the mother of a 2-year-old daughter, Grace, loves being home, outside, a good cup of coffee, a pastry, always. Welcome, Sarah.
Thank you, Penny. You can hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, good deal. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and get this presentation going. Thanks everyone for being here tonight. Thanks for sharing your evening with us so late. We appreciate it. Penny, thanks again for the intro and inviting us to be a part of this webinar, kind of part 2 from October. So happy to be a part of it. Just want to share with you guys tonight some information about what is ReadyCycle and why we chose to introduce it to the market. In 2017, we decided to introduce an alternative to single-use plastics, kind of taking on the next chapter of our legacy in packaging and providing an alternative to consumers, retailers, and growers. And we felt that for the following reasons that I'll kind of mention going forward, why we thought it was a great option for our industry. So with that, we decided to choose an unwaxed and unlabeled product that we could directly print on, and we decided to choose paperboard for various reasons. One being an established recycle stream that we felt consumers were very familiar with, and it was an intuitive material that consumers, retailers were used to handling, and over 46 tons get recycled and reclaimed, and we wanted it to remain an intuitive material. We also wanted this material to be locally manufactured. We thought that it would be a great intuitive choice for the organic community, not just the consumer, but for our growers as well. And we really think ReadyCycle is a storyboard, a way to communicate the choice of going towards a sustainable packaging and what it means for that brand, what it means for that farmer. And we thought that that was pretty impactful versus a small little 2 1/4 by 2 1/4 label that you usually see on a clamshell package. We also are proud that ReadyCycle is part of the paperboard family, and it's also home compostable and can be incorporated into that brown layer just like any other cardboard or some of your dry materials, that whether it's dry leaves or yard waste and whatnot, so it can be folded right into that as well. And we just feel like it was a great actionable step towards sustainable options for produce packaging in our industry. So what is ReadyCycle? ReadyCycle looks like this. The image to the right is a new package that we introduced last year. We're really excited about. We've been definitely opening up to other commodities beyond berries, which was kind of where we started, in berries and tomatoes, branching out into several different commodities, which I'll show you guys a little bit later. But we do coat ReadyCycle with a water-based protective coating on the outside. The inside liners and also the medium can be treated as well. What is ReadyCycle made with in the paperboard? It's up to 30% recycled fiber content. We have water-based coatings and vegetable-based inks. It is made without wax, PFAs, labels, and plastic components. And end-of-use choices for ReadyCycle. We can recycle ReadyCycle into the established paperboard recycle stream. It can be reused. We did a really fun project with Farm Discovery Live Earth Farms with their pint baskets for their education program a few years ago, and use them as seed starters. And that's just one way to cleverly reuse them. They also can be, again, composted into that brown layer. I have here pictured an earth machine, which was actually got from the Santa Cruz County Public Works Department, and we're actually a green waste customer, but we were able to get a free earth machine and take a composting class for our family, and it was pretty awesome. So those resources are available. And what does ReadyCycle look like? I wanted to show some examples of how ReadyCycle has really blossomed over the past 4 years into several commodities and retail environments. When we started ReadyCycle, again, it was kind of with this niche group of organic growers that kind of helped us pioneer it with a few retailers that definitely had the consumer buy-in of reducing plastics in the produce section, and that has just continued to grow year after year. And getting into blueberries and heirloom tomatoes and mushrooms, figs and artichokes. What you saw earlier was organic ginger, and more stores are looking to make those steps towards sustainable packaging options. And we're excited that ReadyCycle is a part of that movement and a part of that change. And where can you find ReadyCycle? We get that question a lot, whether it's on social or just in conversation with clients and what retailers are supporting this. There's several here locally. This is just kind of a short list. Farmers Market is also a great place to find ReadyCycle, and through CSAs. CSAs have also, especially last year, have looked at getting ReadyCycle a part of their CSA box or their produce boxes to house some of those smaller items, whether they be strawberries, tomatoes, or peppers, or tomatillos. And so you can also ask your local CSA if it's available. Thank you guys so much again for your time and for being with us tonight. And Penny, thanks so much for having us a part of this webinar. We've enjoyed it. Thanks so much.
Okay. Well, thank you, Sarah. And it's amazing that ReadyCycle is, can go through every single stream. That's amazing.
Thanks, Penny.
That is a true product that fits all the tickets. So anyways, our next presenter is Laura Olson, and Laura is the zero waste manager at World Centric that makes compostable food service ware, and wanted to add that 25% of their company profits also goes towards global impact programs, which is pretty awesome. Lauren's been working in sustainability for the past 12 years and has a background in environmental decision-making, chemical hazard management. Lauren's going to talk about the compostable materials that they use and how it all fits with the circular economy. Welcome, Lauren.
Having me. Let me go ahead and share my screen. And present. All right, hopefully that's working. Can I get a thumbs up, Penny? Yeah, okay, good. Let me go to the beginning. World Centric, we're based in Roanoke Park, California. So we're in North Bay in Sonoma County. And we were originally founded as a nonprofit by our founder, Asim Das, and he was actually looking to do some environmental nonprofit work and began selling compostables among other things and to fund his nonprofit, and they took off. So eventually it was converted to a for-profit enterprise, but we still have sort of the nonprofit mission where we donate 25% of our profits to nonprofits abroad, particularly those focused on extreme poverty, like providing people cook stoves or basic sanitation or clean water. We're also a B Corp and minority certified corporation. And we also, in addition, offset 100% of our carbon every year. So I'll just zoom through this because you all know the problems of petroleum and deforestation. Obviously, it's not a good way to go. It's not great for the environment, and we should keep the oil in the ground, keep the trees for the indigenous people, all of that stuff. So I'll skip past that. But something I haven't heard people talk about is that landfilling organics creates greenhouse gases. So it's really important that we keep organic waste out of the landfill because that creates methane, because it's an anaerobic, meaning methane generating environment. So there's no oxygen in that. And methane is a very powerful, potent greenhouse gas, 25 times more potent than carbon dioxide. So if you don't currently compost, I'm sure a lot of you do, but now's a great time to start if that is emphasis that you need, that you're really helping out in terms of climate change. So not only home composting, but diverting your food waste as much as possible. And compostables are a big part of that because people can leave their food waste in the compostable products rather than, just putting them all in the landfill. Composting is also great because it uses less energy than recycling and it can be done locally. The whole composting process takes 9.6 times less energy than portions of the normal PET, polyethylene terephthalate sort of recycling process, which requires a lot of sorting and baling and washing. So the conversion over to composting is really great in terms of the life cycle at the end of use, end of life of the product. So at World Centric, we make over 250 SKUs of compostable food serviceware. So we have molded fiber, not only in plates, bowls, and containers, and also cutlery. So this is our newest item. It's very innovative. It's actually like all utensils made out of molded fiber. So very cool. We also have bioplastic items, cold cups, deli containers, and lids. Talc and bioplastic. Talc is actually used as an annealing agent on the bioplastic for the cutlery. An annealing, for those of you who don't remember from chemistry, means that it becomes the center of a chemical reaction, which causes the crystallinity of the talc in the bioplastic together to give it rigidity. And no, the talc does not migrate out of the bioplastic, so there's no worries about that. But we also test our talc for arsenic for those of you that are concerned. The No Tree line that we have is innovative in that it doesn't use any wood fiber whatsoever. It uses all of that sugarcane and bagasse. Sugarcane bagasse is left over from the sugar manufacturing process. So after they've done squeezing out all the sugar that they need from the sugarcane, what's left is the fiber, and that fiber is used to develop our paper and molded fiber. So it's an agricultural byproduct that would normally be burned. And we're using that as raw material. So our No Tree line is based on those sort of materials. When we do use paper, because it is a very strong product, there's a reason we've been using paper for thousands of years. We use FSC, which is Forest Stewardship Certified paper, and that all comes from responsibly harvested wood. And we really are very adamant about that because we support a lot of indigenous people in their protection of forests, both in America and abroad. And we also make bioplastic food waste bags. So you might know those from your tabletop composter. and those do fully biodegrade. So I'm just going to go into, all of our products are scientifically tested to be compostable. There is a standard test method for compostability, and these have been developed by teams of scientists and are reviewed periodically. We just had another review last year, and these are called ASTM 6400 and D6868. Depends on the material to what test you have. It requires disintegration, so 90% disintegration within 84 days, less than 2 millimeter pieces. Biodegradation, which is all of the carbon within the product is converted to carbon dioxide by bacteria and microbes working in the compost. This has to be done within 6 months in a complete biodegradation. All of these add up to the item actually being compostable. So it has to be biodegradable and disintegrate. And to make it compostable, it has to be good for plants. So it is tested to ensure that the plants actually accept the compost, are thriving in it, doesn't contain any chemicals of concern, heavy metals, all of that. So if anyone tells you, that certain things like maybe aren't compostable, you should look for these types of tests that the product has to actually do. And we label all of our products somewhere that they pass the ASTM 6400 and 6868. There's also certification bodies that will look at these lab tests for you. One being BPI, the Biodegradable Products Institute. So that's another label you can look for. Up in the Pacific Northwest, particularly near Seattle, Cedar Grove has developed their own label called Compost Manufacturing Alliance, CMA. And in Europe, they use TUV Austria, which is the lab which initiates its own certification label called OK Compost Industrial. So you can look for all of these labels, which mean that they are certified to be commercially compostable. That means compostable in a commercial environment. And you might ask, why not at a home environment? Well, these composting professionals are professionals, and they're highly trained on how to make compost from items in a very quick manner. They have a high volume, high mass, and they're caring for their composting very well. So that's not to say you can't try to compost these at home, but they are best composted by professionals. Now you might say, well, my commercial composting facility doesn't accept these products. Does that mean that they're not truly compostable and that you're lying to everyone? Well, the truth is that the compostability of compostable products is quite complicated. And one of the biggest things that's the impediment in order to creating the circular economy of compostable products is the USDA's National Organic Program, which labels bioplastic as a synthetic ingredient, which is unfortunate because a lot of food also has synthetic ingredients. We all have high fructose corn syrup that we're avoiding, GMO food, inks. There's countless synthetic additives into food, yet these are permissible into compost, yet bioplastic is not. So if you have a commercial composter nearby and they are seeking to have organic certification for their compost, they might not allow compostable products because they are concerned about getting too much bioplastic. This is not to say that bioplastic doesn't fully compost. It means that they don't want it because they're getting this organic certification. Additionally, you might have other composters who are simply not designed for food waste or compostable products. They are maybe designed for green waste or yard waste. They might have an accelerated composting cycle. So for example, if a composter is trying to get everything done within 25 days, they might have a difficult time accepting compostable products as well as larger branches and leaves and other items. There's also contamination concerns. People are concerned that, if they start accepting compostable products, they might get lookalike products. And we're trying our best in terms of labeling to ensure that people really understand what items are and are not compostable products and what are greenwashing lookalikes. Well, that's about it from me. You can feel free to contact me with any further questions, and I'll try to answer some of your questions in the chat.
Okay, great. Thank you, Lauren, for that presentation. Our next presenter is Jeff Anderson from Full Cycle Bioplastics. Jeff is the co-founder of Full Cycle Bioplastics and a serial entrepreneur who brings a wealth of experience in the clean tech industry, where he's served in multiple executive roles in clean energy and waste repurposing. Jeff is a co-inventor of food waste to bioplastic conversion technology and did his master's thesis on economics in PHA production. He's going to talk about how his company is tackling plastic pollution and climate change by transforming organic plant matter into a compostable alternative to oil-based plastics. And I'm very pleased to have him participating in our event today. Welcome, Jeff.
Thanks, Penny. Happy to be here, and thanks for assembling the panel. Feel like we're in good company, which is nice. I'm Jeff Anderson. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Full Cycle Bioplastics. My twin brother and I founded the company back in 2014. We're both ocean lovers at heart, and we experienced the plastic pollution problem firsthand as we were body surfing down in San Diego and continually getting hit in the face with ocean plastic pollution, which is one of the grossest forms, quite honestly. And so we decided to do something about it, and we invented our take on a solution. Our headquarters is in San Jose, California, and we also run a facility at a large tech company in Silicon Valley. So skip forward here. So Full Cycle invented a technology that converts organic waste, and that's anything that degrades naturally in the environment, anything you would put in a compost row or an anaerobic digester, even most bioplastics. And we convert that into a high quality bioplastic called PHA. Now, most people are familiar with PLA, which is polylactic acid. That's one of the biggest bioplastics on the market. Now, PHA is different and has been around for a while, but has always been very expensive. So we'll get to that in a minute. PHA, the bioplastic that we make, can replace most of the petroleum-based plastics market in the sense of polypropylene, polyethylene, and polystyrene. And we're effectively trying to solve three global problems at once. The first is food waste, which I think was just mentioned, that it causes greenhouse gases in landfill, the climate change that comes from those greenhouse gases, and of course, the plastic pollution problem itself. We're not relying on any cultivated food crops because we use food waste as a feedstock. We're not relying on the arable land that it takes to grow those cultivated food crops because we're using waste facilities and waste feedstock. And we don't use any genetically modified organisms to make our PHA. We're also the only bioplastic company using organic waste as feedstock to make our PHA. And this allows us to really unlock the true potential of that bioplastic. Our PHA is different from others because it is actually completely circular. It is bio-derived, meaning it doesn't use any fossil fuels in its creation. It's also bio-benign, so if it finds itself in the environment, it actually does no harm. That means it's compostable, can be eaten by bacteria and animals. Even I have eaten some just to prove a point. It doesn't taste very good, a little bit gritty, not a great mouthfeel, but overall it does no harm in general. Our PHA is also marine degradable, so if it falls into the ocean, it can actually be eaten by algae and fish, and to top that off, it's certified as a fish food additive for aquaculture. So because of these characteristics, after going out in the market and at its end of life, our PHA returns to the organic stream. It's compostable and labeled as such, so it should be thrown in the green bin and then find its way back to us, basically, where it breaks down just like food waste. Except food waste is our feedstock, and so we actually convert our PHA back into virgin PHA again by breaking it down into its basic building blocks, just like the food waste, and then building it back up. So we're effectively organically upcycling our own bioplastic, hence the name Full Cycle. Go ahead and skip forward one. Yeah, this is an exciting time for us. We're growing, and we actually believe that our PHA is the future of plastics, or at least one of the futures of plastics. And we're experiencing a huge demand for our PHA. So we've seen large companies publicly commit to reusable packaging. And at this time, we are under non-disclosure agreements. We can't name names, but we are working with major global food producers and large tech companies to transform their own waste, their own food waste, into their own plastics packaging, which is really a new paradigm in that plastics packaging. We'll go ahead and skip forward. Yeah, we've all gathered here tonight because we collectively recognize that the world has too much waste and too much plastic. We likely all agree that change needs to happen now to heal our planet. And there's a variety of plastic alternatives that are currently in the market, and we've heard about many of them today. Full Cycle is different than all of those in that sense. Because our PHA is made from waste, which is a negative cost feedstock, meaning we get paid to take it. It currently is a cost to dispose of for these guys. Our production costs are lower than that of existing alternatives, resulting in lower cost PHA. And even at the price of petroleum-based plastics, we can come in at the same price as them, which means we don't pay the premium that normally petroleum plastics or more normal bioplastics would pay, except we're much, much more sustainable. Because of our PHA's versatility, it can be used in a variety of products like packaging, food containers, utensils, and most things that polypropylene, polyethylene, and polystyrene can be used for. We're very excited about that. The application, I mean, it's really limitless in a lot of ways. And since we're behind, I think I'll probably wrap it up there. But if you have specific questions, feel free to shoot me an email or ask me in the chat. And feel free to visit our website at fullcyclebioplastics.com.
Okay, great. So that wraps it up for our presenters this evening. And because we are running behind, I think we'll just go directly into our Q&A session. Pauline, how have people been forwarding some questions to you?
Some of us have been answering in the chat box. I wanted to share a resource. Some people have been asking, you know, like, how can I get involved in manufacturers producing less plastic? Like, how can I go upstream to change things? And I wanted to let people know about Californians Against Waste, and their URL is cawrecycles.org. It's a nonprofit. They lobby our legislators at the state level, and they also post any laws regarding waste, including extended producer responsibility bills, which have been mentioned in some of the talks. So talking to your representative, if there's a bill that comes up, or you know, working collectively, it can have a much bigger impact. Obviously, there's other pathways. Jana likes to say, vote with your dollars, and I do too. So what you're buying out in the stores, it does tell the market what to produce. So that's why there's like a market for Jeff to be an entrepreneur and doing what he's doing. So, you know, it can feel like a little overwhelming, all the plastics out in the world, and we're one person. But I think we're seeing more examples of how if we work collectively, it does have an impact. So I really appreciate that, you know, Penny pulled this webinar together. Like, look, we had almost 300 people, I think, at the peak. So it just shows you what the interest is out there.
Yeah, I agree. There's a lot of interest in this, and a lot of work to be done. And really, you know, I think one thing that kind of came out of the plastics in agriculture, and as well as this, is that there is a need for plastics. I mean, it serves a purpose. Okay, it's but the thing is once it's served its purpose, then it doesn't need to be around for 10,000 years. So really, the scale, I think, at which a lot of these packages are created, they're just they're around for way too long. It's not that we don't need, you know, these kinds of containers for things, but it's just that they don't go away then. So I think there is a transition really that needs to happen. It's not going to all happen overnight, turning things around, where, you know, bioplastics is I think a very good way to transition and away from fossil fuels in particular. I'm curious, Pauline, are there any questions that you've received that we can, for our presenters? I don't know if she's hearing me or not. I don't see her mic on. Boy, I don't know how to get into the questions either.
Penny, I'm here.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
There's been 100 questions.
Wow. Okay.
Thereabouts. I'm rounding slightly. Most of which have been competently answered by our presenters. Some of them I answered because I thought I knew the answer. Some of them have been answered more than once. Now, I could go through a few, which I think there are some very, very specific questions. A lot of questions have been asked by Kevin. Kevin Bell is very knowledgeable on this subject. And I know we'll be putting up this slide with all the contact information soon. So a few people have been asking for that. So I'm wondering whether we should put that up while I go through a few of the questions which are fairly common, have been asked more than once. So I think a few people might like to hear the answers because they have not necessarily been looking back in the question and answer. So maybe.
Yeah, if you can ask a couple of the questions now, that would be great.
So let's ask Ethan to put up the slide because that is one of the questions people have is how to contact.
Okay,
now,
sure.
Penny, does that include where you will be posting the recording?
I'll be sending the recording out to everyone that registered. I'll also be posting it on the Open Farm Tours website.
Right, and I'll also be posting them on the FCCAN website, which is what I've been telling some people because I knew that was correct. So I wanted to just get some of the answers dealt with. So here goes a few things. A few people asked about waxed paper milk cartons. Are they really waxed or is it a plastic coating? Leslie answered they are not actually waxed. They are lined with PET #1 plastic. And you can't, there's no ways to separate it right now, which is why they're not recycled currently because #1 is a recyclable when it's by itself. Is that correct, Leslie?
That is correct. And so, but the #1 that most manufacturers for end markets are looking for is that bottle plastic.
Right. I'm going to find some of.
What were some of the questions that Kevin Bell had?
I'll get to those in a second. What does EPR stand for? That is Extended Producer Responsibility. And there are some bills coming up to work on improving that. The US is behind Europe in a lot of this stuff. So let's find some of Kevin's questions. Let's see which are the best ones. Has any, and this was answered, but we'll get to it here. Has any jurisdiction banning PFAs succeeded in preventing PFAs contaminated packaging, including national food chains? So I know somebody answered that. I think it was just Washington.
Yeah, I know Washington has done that. But that's mostly, I think, related to things that are for like sold by the state of Washington, like at state parks and facilities and things like that. But it has a lot of carryover into the state of Washington itself. And I think the state of New York is looking at it in a few years, implementing something involving PFAS in compostable food packaging. But the major certification body, BPI, prohibits PFAS, as well as CMA, the Compost Manufacturers Association. So the whole industry is phasing out PFAS.
This says consumers, this was from Peter Soaks, consumers can only do a minimal amount of use reduction. What can we do to prevent the manufacture of plastic packaging?
I just addressed that, but there was something I was thinking about that I want to add. So thinking outside the box, you know, I think our plastic problem, it's really just a symptom of a lot of this unhealthy, like at a macro level, this unhealthiness at a macro level with our economy, and you know, how we use resources both nationally and globally. I think that even if you go into the micro level, if you're engaging in activities that are promoting physical and mental health or healthier relationships, or you're doing it on like a city level, a school level, like we need like each level to be operating that way for the whole system to work. So I just want to say, like, you know, like invest in your health, invest in be involved in like city governance. Like it may not seem like you're doing much when you, again, when you have like such a global problem, but it really requires all of us to be working at that level to reform the whole system. And, you know, people do look to us and in California sometimes, and they're like, wow, like this city did it. We want to do too. Like they make it a case study or an argument to do it somewhere else. So, and when laws in California changed at the level of companies having to change their business practices, they don't just change their business practices in California, they roll it out nationally because it's not economical to just have it function, have it in one way in a state and not the rest of the country.
I'd like to add to that, Angela. I often talked when we were going out to do tabling events about how Santa Cruz is the tail that wags the dog. So many of the things that were banned here in Santa Cruz or in our area actually had to be done nationally. So for just a real quick example, Best Buy e-waste. Santa Cruz or SoCal, basically Santa Cruz County said, if you're going to sell electronics here, Best Buy, you're going to have to do something about the e-waste. And Best Buy said, well, if we're going to do something in this store in SoCal, California, we're going to do it across our entire chain. So if I go into a Best Buy in Chicago, they have to collect e-waste. And a lot of it's just because of what happened in SoCal, California. So I really feel like if there is enough of a groundswell and working at a local community level, we can accomplish more broad strokes and broad changes.
Thank you. So following up on that though, just a sort of personal question, is it better locally to take your e-waste to Best Buy or to Demio Lane?
I would take my e-waste to Great Bears as a county resident, but as a city resident to Demio.
Yeah, I mean, it just, so speaking for Demio, I think it depends. Santa Cruz County runs our household hazardous waste and our e-waste program. So a lot of it, you know, we have to be aware of what's called universal waste. There's some things that can't go in recycling or the landfill, and those have a cost to process them. So I think the most important thing is to find a place to take them. So that's a split. We just want to make sure, you know, we can assure you at Demio that if you bring us e-waste, it's getting routed to the proper place, even if we have to pay for it or the county pays for it.
Thank you. So Kevin had a couple of questions about PFAS and related things. What are the counties doing to identify and call out PFAS contaminated products for distributors, retailers, and consumers? In other words, how do you avoid it if you don't know it's there? And what exactly is the moisture-based, water-based moisture barrier in Ready Cycle? So that's for Sarah.
I think I did just see on the side notes that Sarah had to sign off. She's got to get little Grace off to bed. And so I do know that in previous conversations with her that is a proprietary, you know, barrier. We have another manufacturer on here of another product that was in Mary's slides, and it's also proprietary, which I think is reasonable. They have to go through testing to show that, you know, they're not, they have the PFAS if they want to be BPI certified. So as far as the county levels, the city in Santa Cruz has recently made some changes to our ordinance to get PFAS out of packaging. And again, we're ahead of the curve. It's a challenge and it's a push, especially during COVID and the economic, you know, situation that restaurants are going through. And we're starting to see some action on the state level. There's been a bill introduced to address PFAS in foodware packaging. So I think we're going to see it from both levels, but it's a hard time to be pushing this stuff through during COVID, important as it is. we wish COVID hadn't happened for sure.
So I know this question was answered but a lot of people might have it. Can we recycle those air-filled plastic packaging materials that companies like Amazon often use? They're just plastic bags, right?
Yeah, they're just air-filled pillows. They're great for reuse. If you're on like a free cycle or a next door and people are often moving and they're trying to wrap stuff, always look for an opportunity to reuse and keep something going. But you want to make sure you're in a jurisdiction that you know how they handle film. Selena had a great slide of which areas don't accept plastic film or bags in their process. The city of Santa Cruz, we do. The county of Santa Cruz, Green Waste as a hauler, they do if it's bagged. You just want to make sure with those air packets that you pop them and you get them secured, because you get a big old long strand of that. It may pop itself in the process, but then it gets wound up in the machinery, and that becomes the biggest issue for all of us, is when they're loose, they get wound up in the machinery. And then being very light, they get into other bales like paper, was mentioned in our presentation, and they get loose in the environment. We all know what plastic bags and plastic films looks like once it's out in the ocean.
So somebody asked, what is wrong with wax coatings? But I guess they're not wax. Is that the answer?
Yeah, I don't know if any of my other, Angela, do you have a thing on that? I don't know how long it's been changed.
So, yeah, I'm not sure when the change happened on the manufacturing side. I do know that milk cartons have a lot of fiber or pulp content. So that is why some cities do accept them in Tetra Paks, even though they are lined with plastic and foil. But you have to have them separated at your MRF, and you have to have a market, and it tends to be challenging. I mean, also because you tend to have liquid in the containers. Like, we were looking at collecting them from schools, and that was really challenging because kids were throwing them out half filled with milk.
Oh, I don't do that at my house.
So the wax is less of the problem. I mean, we don't take wax cardboard in the recycling program. The smaller items I think might be accepted, but there just aren't markets for them because there's so actually, like you saw my slide where I talked about contamination. Paper and cardboard were right there at the top. That's like our biggest material stream. So there's so much paper fiber out there already. It's like so cheap. They can get it for free, or I'm paying them to take it away from me and recycle it. So why would they take this like lower grade material? That's where we do find these outlets where people are recycling things on principle. Like, it can be recycled. We don't feel good about landfilling it, so we're going to recycle it. And this is where I think that it gets a little tricky, where maybe redesigning the products and packaging that are more sustainable, that manufacturers want to recycle them or reuse them. But, it takes capital and it takes markets to be developed. For example, my boyfriend, he's actually in the beverage business, and they have a canned product, and aluminum is really scarce right now. It's in really high demand, but there aren't enough facilities to smelt it, to recycle it, and there aren't enough facilities to manufacture cans. So even though demand's really high and it's a very sustainable form of packaging, there hasn't been the capital investment to expand that market to meet that demand. So these things are happening on like a very large scale, and there's opportunities, but this is where maybe we need government to step in. I know there's a lot of hope with the Biden administration with some areas of sustainability, that he's going to be investing in more sustainable infrastructure through creating grants and incentives and such things like that.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So, and I totally agree. I think that designing the products, I think it really kind of starts a lot with designing the products to have the end of life cycle, like the aluminum cans. You know, that there's a market for it. It's got the closed loop sort of thing going on with it already. And so I think having more materials like that and supporting that, you know, funding that is going to be key moving forward. And I really think that sustainability is going to be driving a lot of our future because it kind of has to in a way. You know, we have to understand that humanity kind of got here because of the patterns, which are a major cause of the problems that we're having now. So, you know, being more systemic and moving more towards a systems way of thinking is really going to solve a lot of these issues that we're having. I think take a couple more questions and then we should probably wrap it up because it's getting kind of late.
Yeah, I was wondering if you wanted to wrap it up right now.
Yeah, it's fine with me. Does anyone else have anything that they wanted to talk about?
One of the things I could do is copy all these questions and answers, and I can include them on my website so people can can review them later. Otherwise, once we close Zoom, they're gone.
Yeah, that's fine if you want to do that. And people can also just, you know, contact from the links page here, and I'll be sending that out with the recording to everyone. So, okay, so thank you everyone for coming and our presenters and everything. And I feel like we all learned a lot this evening, and also just to keep the hope alive, you know, that all these things create opportunities for us to live in a more sustainable world. So that's something that we really should be looking forward to. And so anyways, so thank you everyone again, and good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
For organizing it, Penny.
Thanks. Bye-bye.